the opposition parties together, right, can enact law via private members' bills that can tame the royal prerogative. What a great opportunity this holds for us, right? Typically in Canada and in the United Kingdom, governments that refuse to respect orders for the production of documents or any other things that touch on the royal prerogative simply say, tough luck, tough luck. Go to the voters, If you get a majority, you can do something about it. If you don't, too bad. This government can't say that, right? This government has to have the confidence of the House, right? And has it in only a minority position. The opposition parties together can force laws to be enacted. It's a minor problem associated with that, and that is that during the 2009-2010 prorogation, Stephen Harper appointed a number of new conservative senators. So you may know that the Conservatives are in the majority in the Senate, but they do not hold the balance of power. Actually, a number of independent senators hold the balance of power. So it's by the numbers, the conservative senators couldn't uphold or block statutory initiatives intended to tame the royal prerogative by themselves. They'd have to have independent senators do that with them. And I think it'd just be a fascinating scenario to see unelected conservative senators blocking democratically enacted initiatives that are intended to tame unfettered discretion of the crown traceable back to the 15th century, right? It would just be a remarkable turn of events. I would, I think it would, they would be following really bad advice, really, if the senators wanted to fight an initiative like this. It really would give rise to a constitutional crisis, I think, of a sort. Certainly one that would interest me. Okay. So there are a number of things that can be done with this minority parliament. Okay, first, Parliament can enact a specific statute, right, requiring the disclosure of unredacted documents as requested in the December 10th motion. Boom. Sure, they can set up a screening committee and only a small number might get access to it who are, sworn in for these purposes because there might be some concern over national security and international relations. We know that these documents are overclassified. We know that's what government does, right? Government overclassifies documents. My wife works for the government of Canada, and numerous of you, I'm sure, were associated with government. They overclassify. We know that there's lots here that can be disclosed that's not being disclosed, and there might legitimately be, indeed, right, some matters that touch on national security that might not actually have much to do with the question, actually, before the House of Commons subcommittee. So we can, of course, devise, as the NDP and Bloc motion have suggested, of a couple of weeks ago, devise a procedure, right, for dealing with those really sensitive documents. And the rest open up, right, shine some light on them. Let's see them via statute. Of course, this would leave a whole bunch of other prerogatives available. And so why not think, right, about doing something about those prerogatives? It's an opportune moment to think about those other prerogatives. They're supposedly prerogatives that we can't define with any precision. Well, let's start defining them, right? Let's start listing them. Let's start considering ways in which we take away that prerogative, right? Control it by statute. Control the exercise of that discretion and make people accountable beyond question period, right? And beyond parliamentary committees, because that's all that we have at present. And, of course, the parliamentary elections. So let's begin that process of listing, of recording, and cabining in the royal prerogative. It's precisely what the United Kingdom House Subcommittee on Administration recommended in 2006. Right? Wow, the English are doing it. At least they're proposing that they do it. Okay? They propose precisely this. And then the government of Gordon Brown just really impressively ordered that the ministers in his cabinet, in each department, have the people within the department list those things that might fall within the scope of the royal prerogative. So they actually undertook the task of trying to list them. Okay? And Brown's government is proceeding in some modest ways to codify the prerogative. Modest ways, as I say. They're not going whole hog just yet. Although Gordon Brown, in the run-up to this year's election, has called for a new written constitution on the 800th anniversary of the Magna Carta. A new written, which means everything written down, right? So that's the sort of radical idea, right? 16th, 17th century onwards, right? This radical idea of codifying these things. The House of Lords recommended in 2006 that the prerogative to deploy troops be addressed. They couldn't come to an agreement about precisely how to do this. Some of the Lords wanted the prerogative to remain within the discretion of the Prime Minister, the Crown, and others wanted to limit it and codify it. Of course, all of this, that House of Commons subcommittee, the House of Lords committee on deploying troops, all of this precipitated, of course, by the fiasco in Iraq, right? By the deployment of troops under Tony Blair to Iraq, right? And it's that fiasco that's now giving rise to reconsiderations of the exercise of the royal prerogative, not just in regard to the deployment of troops, but in regard to its availability in all kinds of areas, right? In the machinery of contemporary government. So those are two obvious things. And the third thing, which needs to be approached with a little bit more delicacy, is curbing the power to prorogue, okay? Which I described as one of those reserve powers exercised by the Governor General on the advice, right, of her Privy Councillors, her Prime Minister. Right? The problem with this prerogative, the reserve power, is that the office of the Queen and the Governor General are mentioned in the amending formula in our Constitution. So if you're going to touch the office of the powers of the Queen and the Governor General, you need unanimity. Okay, so you need the consent of Parliament and all 10 provinces, which is a real problem because we can't have a republic, basically, without unanimity, and that's unlikely ever to happen. So the office of the Queen and Governor General are preserved to the extent that limiting the power to prorogue somehow implicates the power of the Governor General. We might be triggering that unanimity amending formula, which will be impossible, right? So instead, what we should do is think about curbing the Prime Minister seeking, right, and requesting the Governor General to prorogue. In other words, providing advice to the Governor General to prorogue or dissolve, for that matter. So this is kind of the antecedent act on the part of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister decides that he will call on the Governor General to prorogue. And it's at that moment, right, when he or she decides that it's time to call the Governor General, that we might imagine the Liberals are suggesting a standing order in the House, the NDP's suggesting statute, right? That might symbolically, right, not substantively, symbolically